Welcome to the second webinar in this two-part series on the ICCA Registry. The ICCA Registry exists to document and support territories and areas conserved by Indigenous peoples and local communities. Thank you for joining. My name is Heather Bingham, and I'm going to discuss how to go about participating in the ICCA Registry. If you have any questions at any stage, please type these into the questions box and they'll be addressed at the end of the webinar. We'll be showing this webinar again over the coming months, so any feedback that can help us improve the content would be much appreciated. This webinar will be recorded and we'll share the recording with you after it ends. We want the information in this webinar to be used as much as possible, so please share the materials widely. This is webinar 2 in a two-part series. The first webinar, which many of you attended, covered the background of the ICCA Registry, who can participate, potential benefits, things to consider before participating, how the information is used, some case studies and safeguards that are in place. Building on this, this webinar will cover different ways to provide data, providing information in different languages, the information required, the peer review process, and what to expect after providing data. In collaboration with partners, we have produced a manual to assist local communities, Indigenous peoples, and those who work with them in providing information to the ICCA Registry. Much of the information in this webinar is also in the manual. It provides a step-by-step guide to registering and can be accessed using the link at the top of this slide. Firstly, I'll briefly recap the topics discussed in webinar 1, specifically what the ICCA Registry is and what Protected Planet is. The ICCA Registry is a voluntary, peer-reviewed avenue for Indigenous peoples and communities, along with the international conservation community, to recognize and protect the multiple values of ICCAs and to highlight their contributions to conservation around the world. It's part of a broader global effort called the ICCA Global Support Initiative, which aims to highlight the vital contributions made by Indigenous peoples and local communities to conservation. The ICCA Registry is managed by UNEP-WCMC and has an advisory committee that includes the ICCA Consortium and UNDP. The Protected Planet website is the home of the World Database on Protected Areas, or WDPA. It contains information on protected areas. The WDPA contains information on all types of protected areas, including those managed by Indigenous peoples and local communities. This means that ICCAs can be included in both the WDPA and the ICCA Registry, or just in one. This is the decision of the data provider. Moving on now to the information that's needed in order to register. This section will cover the two types of information that are needed to register: descriptive information and spatial information. Descriptive information describes the features of the ICCA. Examples of the information fields include the name of the ICCA, the size, whether or not it's legally designated, whether the ICCA is under the governance of Indigenous peoples or local communities, or under shared governance, and who legally owns the land. For the WDPA, there are 21 information fields that need to be completed by the data provider. Only 12 of these are mandatory. The remaining 9 fields are optional. The ICCA Registry contains all of the same fields plus an additional 30 fields. These are all optional. Some of the information fields can only be completed with specific values. An example is the governance type field, which must be completed with one of the values shown on the current slide. Some of the other information fields are free text. For example, the name of the ICCA, the management authority of the ICCA, and the designation, for example, a community forest. As I mentioned earlier, the ICCA Registry contains additional information fields. This is to enable it to store more in-depth information on the biodiversity, cultural, and other values of ICCAs. Examples include the name of the community, the size of the community, whether the community has legal or other rights to the natural resources in the ICCA, and which community members are entitled to use those resources. The ICCA Registry also stores detailed information on the history of the ICCA, the biodiversity that is conserved within the ICCA, and other relevant information. This means that it stores much more in-depth information on ICCAs than the WDPA. A full list of the descriptive information fields and their accepted values is available in the ICCA manual. As well as descriptive information, spatial information is required. This enables the location of the ICCA to be shown on a map. For the World Database on Protected Areas, the spatial information that is required is a boundary of the ICCA. For the ICCA Registry, it's preferable to have a boundary, but if this is not possible, then a point location or latitude-longitude location of the ICCA is acceptable. A point location can also be provided to the WDPA in place of a boundary if, for example, there are boundary disputes associated with the ICCA. However, boundaries are strongly encouraged. This will be discussed further in the next section. This section will discuss the ways in which information can be provided. It will include details on providing information in different languages, providing descriptive information, and providing spatial information. Information can be provided in any language. The ICCA Registry questionnaire is only available in 4 languages, so support from someone who speaks one of these languages may be required if the community wishes to provide information in another language. The languages the questionnaire is available in are English, French, Spanish, and simplified Chinese. Currently, only the English questionnaire is available on the registry website. The other languages are available on request from the email address shown at the bottom of the screen. Our partners are also very welcome to translate the questionnaire into any other language if they have the time and resources to do so. An example is the Chinese translation, which was kindly provided by Jeff SGP China. We're also very grateful if those partners are happy for us to use the translated questionnaires for ongoing outreach. All of the documents needed to participate are available on the ICCA Registry website through the Participate page shown here. The process of participating is largely the same, regardless of whether you're providing data to the ICCA Registry, the World Database on Protected Areas, or both. The best way to register is to download the documents from the Participate page, complete them, and return them by email to the email address shown on the screen. The questionnaire that can be downloaded from the website can be used to provide information to either of the databases or to both at once. It contains all of the information fields that are used in the WDPA, plus the additional fields that are used by the ICCA Registry only. An alternative way of providing data is to request a spreadsheet version of the questionnaire. This method may be helpful if you are submitting information on more than one ICCA. It means that each ICCA can be added as a separate row in the spreadsheet rather than filling out a questionnaire for each one. If you wish to use this option, you can request the spreadsheet from the email address shown here. The final option is to provide descriptive information as a table within spatial data. This is the most technically involved option and requires GIS experience. The example shown here is the tabular information linked to spatial information on Indigenous protected areas in Australia. If you have GIS experience and would like to use this option, you can contact us for details on the database structure and other advice. This leads us to the next topic, which is providing spatial information. If you're providing data to the WDPA, then you will need to provide a spatial boundary for the ICCA. If you are providing data only to the ICCA Registry, then you can still provide a spatial boundary if you wish to, but a point location for the ICCA is also acceptable. This means a latitude-longitude point, usually the central point of the ICCA. This may be the best option for ICCAs where the boundaries are disputed or uncertain. When you complete the questionnaire, you will be asked to provide this latitude-longitude location. The reason that spatial boundaries are useful is that they allow ICCAs to be represented on a map alongside other kinds of protected areas or other features. Spatial boundaries represent the outer limits or borders of the ICCA. They can be created using GIS or Geographic Information Systems software. If a boundary for the ICCA does not already exist, then communities may wish to engage in a participatory mapping process. If the community has access to expert assistance, then the participatory map can be converted into a digital boundary. One option for producing spatial boundaries is to use software called QGIS. This is free software that can be downloaded online using the website address shown on the screen. However, using it requires experience. UNEP-WCMC can provide advice on mapping techniques and digitizing boundaries. In some cases, we can also assist with digitizing boundaries. ICCAs that are submitted to the WDPA with a spatial boundary each have their own page on the Protected Planet website. Each page displays the ICCA's location on a map, along with its descriptive information and information on the data provider. The example shown on the screen is Caiapo in Brazil. In addition to providing descriptive and spatial information, data providers need to provide supporting documentation in the form of a Data Contributor Agreement, or DCA. The Data Contributor Agreement must be signed by the data provider, and this is a requirement for all data submissions. The purpose of the Data Contributor Agreement is to ensure that the data provider has agreed to the inclusion of the data in the WDPA or ICCA Registry. It also helps us to keep a record of the source of the information. It is a condition of the Data Contributor Agreement that the data provider must have the free, prior, and informed consent of the ICCA's custodians to provide the data to UNEP-WCMC. It is the responsibility of the data provider to ensure that communities have given their consent for this to happen. The Data Contributor Agreement replaces the free, prior, and informed consent form which was previously used for the ICCA Registry. This next section will discuss the peer review process. It will cover the national level nature of the process and provide examples of countries that have designed and implemented a process. All information from non-government sources is peer-reviewed before it enters the databases. This process allows the peer reviewers to raise any concerns about how the information was gathered. This includes whether an appropriate free, prior, and informed consent process has been carried out. The peer review process differs across countries, and the details of the process are determined at the national level rather than by WCMC. The process may involve networks of ICCA custodians and supporting NGOs or other experts. The ICCA consortium can help to support the process in countries where it has representatives. Lastly, if the ICCA's custodians request it, then the national government can be asked to verify that the ICCA is part of its national system of protected areas. In terms of the design of the peer review process, it's preferable for national or regional networks of ICCA custodians to be responsible for agreeing and implementing the process, in cases where such networks exist. As partners in the ICCA Global Support Initiative, GEF Small Grants Programme and the ICCA Consortium may be in a position to assist with designing and implementing this process. In the Philippines, a peer review process has been outlined by the National ICCA Consortium called Buklaran, in collaboration with the National Indigenous Peoples Coalition called CASAPI, and the Philippine Association for Intercultural Development. The process describes how the decision to register should arise as part of a larger process in which communities collectively develop their awareness and understanding of their ICCA's values. This process may involve participatory mapping or other documentation or community-based planning exercises. Once the community has collectively decided through a free, prior and informed consent process to register their ICCA, the peer review process is carried out. The process is carried out by the ICCA representatives who have been elected to run the Philippines ICCA Consortium. As part of this review process, the representatives consider whether registration poses possible threats to the ICCA's biodiversity or cultural values. The ICCA is then submitted to the ICCA Registry, with the aim of providing an added layer of protection to the ICCA and to encourage the community to pursue their conservation aims and other ambitions. A second example is Iran, where a four-step process has been outlined by UNINOMAD, which is the Union of Indigenous Nomadic Tribes of Iran, in collaboration with SENESTA, which is the Center for Sustainable Development and Environment. In the first step, communities carry out three assessments: a territorial assessment, which involves participatory mapping, an ecological assessment, involving adding ecological assets to the maps and considering current ecological trends, and a governance assessment involving identification and strengthening of customary governance structures. If the results of these assessments reveal that the area can be considered an ICCA, then the community can decide to take a free, prior and informed decision to declare its ICCA. This is step 2. In step 3, the community can choose to submit the results of their assessments to the National Registry of ICCAs, which is maintained by SENESTA. In the final step, SENESTA prepares the documentation for inclusion in the ICCA Registry and/or World Database on Protected Areas. At this point, the information is also sent to relevant government agencies for their information and for inclusion in reporting on international agreements. The final example is Spain, where an in-depth 10-step process has been developed by Iniciativa Comunales. In brief, the process involves identification of potential ICCAs, followed by sharing of information with the ICCA's custodians. The community then decides, through a free, prior and informed consent process, whether to register, with the agreement of a peer review facilitation organization. After the information forms have been completed, the information goes to review by 2 anonymous reviewers, who must also be members of an ICCA community. This is followed by review by the facilitating organization, and then review by an ICCA Registry Committee, which meets annually. This process is facilitated by Iniciativa Comunales, but the ultimate decision is taken by ICCA communities. This is followed by a 5-yearly review process. There is also an annual review of the peer review process itself and its governance structure, carried out by ICCA communities, academics, and other experts. The examples from these 3 countries demonstrate that the peer review process can vary significantly from country to country and can be relatively simple or complex depending on the context. The next section is on how to provide a case study to be displayed on the ICCA Registry website. Case studies are an optional part of registering with the ICCA Registry. They provide communities with the option of sharing the story of their ICCA online. Case studies can also include photos, documents, and links to other websites or resources. There is a template that communities can use when writing their case study if they wish. This template is available on the Participate page with the other registration documents. If a community provides a case study, this will be made available online through the Explore pages of the ICCA Registry website. The ICCA will be shown as a point location on a global map and will have its own case study page. The example shown here is Havakavaara ICCA in Finland. This final section will cover what to expect after registering, including when to expect information to be added to the databases, how the data will be used, and what ongoing support to expect. After quality checking has been carried out and the peer review process is complete, information usually enters the databases within 2 months. We understand that peer review processes haven't been developed yet in many countries, so we will hold data until a peer review process has been carried out. In these cases, data are labeled as awaiting peer review and won't be displayed online or shared. For countries that do have a peer review process, such as Spain, it is compulsory for ICCAs to go through that process before being added to the database. In order to make sure that data are still current, we will contact data providers every 5 years for confirmation and for any updates. If the data provider can't be contacted, we will contact the peer review organization. We will consider removing data if neither party can be reached within a reasonable amount of time. Once data are in the databases, they may be used for a number of different things. If there are no restrictions on how the data can be used, then they may be used by researchers, scientists, and non-governmental organizations, for example, to understand the multiple values of ICCAs, to understand more about the conservation efforts and impacts of local communities and indigenous peoples, or to investigate the status of global conservation efforts as a whole, including measuring progress towards international targets. The data may also be used by businesses, which particularly use the World Database on Protected Areas in order to avoid planning operations inside areas or ICCAs. And they may be used by members of the public or custodians of other ICCAs in order to learn more about ICCAs around the world. In terms of ongoing support, registered communities can contact us at any time to make changes to their data, ask questions, discuss any concerns they may have about their registration or data, to add or remove restrictions on the data, which relate to who can see and use the data, to add or remove a case study from the ICCA Registry website, or to make changes, or to request that their data be removed from the databases. Thank you all for attending. On your screen, there are 3 links to the ICCA Data Manual, which contains much of the information you've just heard. There's an English version, a French version, and a Spanish version. There are also contact details on the screen in case you have further questions after the webinar ends. I'll now answer questions that have been sent in during the webinar. If you have any further questions, please type these into the questions box.